find out what I'm going to say. I've got some notes too. Hello, it's good to be back. I must say, I said to Murray, I said to Murray on the phone yesterday, I expect you to be wearing a tie, Murray. And he said, I will if you will. How many times has that been said, eh? And so I brought a tie with me in the case, and I walked in and found him in the same old powder blue sweatshirt that we've seen him in for all these years. So I thought, what the hell? I'll go on like the slob I am. So I am. We are going to meet some wonderful people. This is going to be the best yet, I think. As we all know, I'm going to move along to the end. I won't be ticked. As we all know, it's a magnificent effort by Murray and all his helpers getting the musicians across to us and organising the bands here in this country. And if it's anything like previous ones have been, and I haven't missed one, I think it's going to be a corker. I really do. 4 days of it too. Providing we don't upset the neighbours, it should be great. So let's introduce some of the people who are coming up next. First of all, and I've jotted this down, our first guest, although he's a little bit more than that really, he's become, as have several of our guests, a friend, very many of us. A rather special friend too. He's entertained us with his reminiscences to such an extent that we sometimes feel there's not much more that could be said. But don't you believe it? There's plenty, as you'll be hearing from the trombonist who joined Stan first in 1946. And of course, it's Mr. Milton Bernhart. I'll let you have your microphone back later on. You're going to have to share this with the person next to you, okay? There's a lot of sharing in this business. Who's next? Okay. Now, we've got to do all this like this because we've got to get them in order. Now, this gentleman had his own bands in Boston before he joined Stan, shortly before Christmas 1953. He took alto solos, replacing cornets, and he stayed with Stan for the next couple of years, leaving at Christmas 55. But he did come back for several stints over the later years. 1959, when he played in the band that played at Newport. He was back on tenor for 6 months in 1962, right smack in the middle of the mellophonium. You're going to tell me he's not here, aren't you? He is, isn't he?
Charlie's flying in. He's due in at 11.
What do you mean, flying in? Doesn't he know what he's wrecking here? All right, I was going to introduce you to that wonderful character. Okay, with whom I might tell you a few years ago, we went shopping in Stratford to buy some things for overseas, and he is the most entertaining man. What a pity he's not here to meet you now. It will be later on Charlie Mariano. We hope he's getting here very quickly. So we pass on all equally quickly to a chap who's not been with us before. He joined the new band Stan formed in the middle of 1958 after the Rendezvous debacle, and he stayed until early 1960. During that time, he was the main tenor soloist and appeared in Stan's albums such as Roadshow and Standards in Silhouette. He's worked for many years, mainly in bands in Las Vegas, and his colleagues are... Oh, what's his name? Ah, yes, many years in Las Vegas. Oh, his colleagues are the likes of Carl Fontana. No, he's not here. No, Carl's not here. Don't worry about that. But I think his nickname, this chap coming up, is General. We'll find out why, perhaps. Let's meet Bill Trujillo. Bill, third chair or not? It's a pleasure to meet you. He'll be known as True from now on. For obvious reasons, he's got such a peculiar surname. Right, now, who's next? Yes, I see. Oh, yes, of course, there's been a bit of reshuffling, so things are sort of as usual, really. You're right, they're running. Been a bit of reshuffling, so we're going to introduce somebody who wasn't at first going to be on the panel, then it was decided that he would, because, as I say, certain people haven't turned up. But he needs absolutely no introduction, and that's the easy way of saying I haven't typed an introduction out for him, because we all know him. I've followed him actually since the days when he used to play down in Folkestone at the Winter Gardens with his massive concert orchestra. very close to Stan's, of course. You see, made contact with Stan an awful lot. And we all know, because the whole thing has been in his honour over the years. And it's a great, great pleasure to welcome back to the panel Mr. Vic Lewis. Hello, Vic. Now, let's see if the order's right. Holness, no, he doesn't need introductions. Let's see, where are we going now? Right, we're on top of it all. Now, this gentleman hails from Chicago, and in fact, I get a Christmas card from him every year, which is rather nice. He joined Stan's trombone section in 1950. He led his own band in Chicago for 4 years. Joining Stan, he started writing new charts from the word go. And his work ranges from originals that are moody, such as Solitaire, to experimentals, such as improvisation. And of course, he wrote all those great arrangements of standards that were heavily featured in albums and broadcasts. And he was with the orchestra, of course, in Innovations in the Modern Music Orchestra, and stayed with Stan until 1953. His abilities, well, he teaches and he leads large ensembles. He's very active in promoting a wide legacy of jazz, and he's one of the nicest people in the business. Let's say hello again to Bill Russo. Bill, good to see you. Now, somebody who's equally familiar to us, he's been to several of these dues, and it's a delight to welcome him back. His working life in music is one of the busiest, of course, whether it's in a big band or a small group. First he was in Woody's band, then in the group that Chubby Jackson took to Sweden. He joined Stan in March 1948, and apart from the time he was with Charlie Ventura, stayed with Stan until the late 1953, but came back to play the trumpet solos for the West Side Story album. If you wondered who it was, that is he. This gentleman has been to these rendezvous parties several times. It's difficult to think of having such an event without him being here. I remember he was at his most entertaining, and I know a lot of people will agree with this, over in the West Coast when we went to Newport, and he was over there with his brother. It's a delight to welcome him back. He's one of the best trumpet players in the business. Please welcome Conte Candoli. Oh. Welcome, Conte. Good to see you back. Thank you. Now, a gentleman who wasn't in the band as a musician, but one of Stan's right-hand men. I had a chat to him outside. He's got a little script with him, which may appear during the course of the conversations. The people who made things go smoothly for the band, he was one of them. He negotiated with the theatre managers. He won almost all of the battles he fought for Stan. Worked with the NBC radio network through 1952 and 53, when every Tuesday the local NBC affiliated radio station would broadcast live Stan for 30 minutes wherever his band was playing at the time. God, that must have been the days. He was on the 1953 European tour, and we remember that, don't we? And recently he's not been in such good health, but it's great that he's here today, maybe to tell us a little of the work that went on that we take so much for granted, that goes on behind the scenes to keep a band like Kenton's in operation. A special welcome to Leo Curran.
I've always wanted to hear that NBC introduction done with the correct accent. Nice enough to read that script, I believe it's the second page.
Okay, I'll read it when I get sat down. Thanks very much. It's known as In at the Deep End, isn't it, really? I would love to have been reading. Okay, right, have someone else. Okay. Right, as Leo makes his way down to the end of the panel, they will give him the longest distance to walk. We're going to meet somebody now who we all know and respect and have enjoyed so many times, that he's a regular, absolute regular. He joined the Kenton band in 1943 when he was 16. He was known as the Kid, he told us all those years ago. He became the first chairman, and after leaving Stan was the first chairman in many other orchestras, including Many formed for recording purposes. He formed his own big band in Chicago 20 years ago, and in the 90s formed his own band in LA. You all know him. He's such a familiar figure. The great Buddy Childers.
Now you're probably all wondering why I called you here. Be a moment while the collection is taken.
We haven't started yet, no.
Yes, we have. You haven't started. Matter of fact, I just heard that the young kid that they're supposed to take back to Cuba, he's got his own band now. Vocals by Janet Reno.
Well, now, I suppose, first of all, having been handed a script, I've got to say, this is a British accent. Through the facilities of Station Corps, the National Broadcasting Corporation takes pleasure in presenting another Stan Kenton concert in miniature. Music in the modern mood, as progressive as today and as new as tomorrow. Direct from ballroom and location, we bring you Stan Kenton's interpretation of progressive music. We're sure you'll enjoy the vitality and imaginative quality of Stan Kenton. Now here is the modern America's man of music and your host, Mr. Stan Kenton. Oh, wow. NBC has brought you another Stan Kenton concert in miniature. Kenton's refreshingly original conception of modern music. Music as progressive as today and as new as tomorrow. Our broadcast tonight came to you direct from ballroom and location through the facilities of Station Call letters. Join us next week at the same time for another Stan Kenton concert in miniature with modern America's man of music. This is Bob Holness speaking. This is NBC, the National Broadcasting Company of America. Oh, wow. And that date is not on here. So, where would it be, Leo? How long ago? 48. Wow.
1952.
52.
I think so.
52. Vic says you're wrong. Right, let's start. We hope we'll be joined by one or two other people, perhaps, I'm going to throw a blanket question down, which is going to actually be advantageous for people like Buddy Childers, because he'll have about half an hour to think about it as we go along the panel. That's right. So the question is, now, Milt's first, you know what that means. Milt, the question.
Yes.
In all the Kenton connections you have made, and every time you've played with the orchestra, what, if you can possibly think of it, what was the most enjoyable time? For what reason? Mm-hmm. Was it because of the music, because of the man, because of the company in the orchestra? There must be an enjoyable span which you really ought to bring out to us here today, which you like remembering.
It's difficult, Bob, because when you're playing, we played every night. And we didn't play exactly the same numbers every night. We played out of a library, and it was a big library, and Stan Kenton being Stan Kenton, he didn't have an order of play. We didn't start with number 1 and work our way to number 100. We just played music as it occurred to the leader, and it's raining. But on that basis, every night was a brand new start, and I cannot possibly come up with a high moment, a moment of extreme pleasure and joy and something memorable that I'll never forget. I usually liked it if it was payday. We were going to get paid that night. Not really, no. Everybody that was on the band was there to take part in a community effort to make music that would reach people. That was the whole idea. I liked it when we played in an auditorium. And that is part of a story I usually tell. Stan Kenton also wanted his band to be able to do that, to play for people who sat and listened, or stood and listened, but listened. And yet 98% of the time we were booked in ballrooms. So it wasn't too much fun for him. And as a matter of fact, people dancing to a band puts the band at a disadvantage. The band becomes wallpaper in most ballrooms. And on that basis, reasonably, Stan didn't want to do that. And he never really got his wish totally, but he did open up a lot of concert halls and venues, and people did listen, because that was the whole objective. I enjoyed that. I felt very good about it, and I felt I was in a very special place because of that. We were playing music to be heard, not to serve as a background to romance, dinner, dining, and whatever else takes place in nightclubs. Music is to be heard, not in elevators, not in grocery stores. It's supposed to be heard. And I usually listen, no matter where it's being done. If I go to a movie, I listen to Lennie Niehaus's score and I forget the picture. I'll bet they do too.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Charlie, come on.
You can
Let
move
him
along.
in.
Move along if you like. True, what about you? You were in there for the fifth. You want to move along?
Hey, you're right.
You've got
Oh, no, you got to
speak.
speak. Come here.
Am I on?
Yeah. True, you were with Kenton 58 through 60. Was that a particularly good phase of the orchestra? You formed so many orchestras. Naturally, you'd have a partiality for that orchestra, but you know, if you could stand back and look at it, do you think it was any better or any worse than any other orchestra?
Well, when I was on the band, it was the best Stan Kenton band that we ever had. You know, forget Buddy Childers, Milt, Bernhart, you know. No, the Count, yeah. To play with Stan Kenton was a thrill. When I got the call, I'd already played with Woody Herman. I'd already played with Charlie Barnett. I already played with some big time bands. But I think Lennie Niehaus got me on the band. We grew up together. We were buddies. We played on kid bands together. We used to play for $7 a night. And now Lennie's making $1 million a movie, and I'm still playing for $7 a night.
Charlie Mariano! Sorry, True, we introduced.
In walked one of my all-time heroes. We were buddies together. We sat on the bus together.
It all comes out in the open, doesn't it? Nobody ever spoke about who was that way then. But I'm prepared to name somebody right now. I've always been suspicious of Conte Candoli. He had a thing for Stan Kenton. We may as well get it out there.
Is it still my turn?
It depends if you're finished.
Get the hook on Milt Bernhart. Get the hook.
Okay. Will you pass it along to
Charlie.
Charlie, the question we asked before you came in.
First of all, thank you for being here, and I'm delighted to be here too again. And wow, to see all these old people. My kind of crowd.
So, Charlie, the question was, looking back over the Kenton bands, was there a particular phase that you're particularly fond of, a particular era? Or particular band, in fact?
Hey, this was another lifetime ago. I don't remember.
Oh, yes, you do. Oh, yes, you do. You remember him. You must remember.
Ooh, that was a good band.
Was that the best?
Well, no, I mean, I think they were, all the bands I was on were great.
Yes. You wouldn't care to expand on that? That's your lot, is it? Okay. I don't know why you came. So, let's pass along to Vic. Give Charlie time to get his settling down process. And Vic, what do you think? You've obviously made contact with all the bands. You've followed them right the way through, like we all have. You must have opinions of that one sort or another.
Yes, I think there's only one band that sticks out in my mind, and the reason being that it was very different to anything else, and that was the Innovations. I think the Innovations Orchestra was the finest band Stan ever had, and I can assure you that whatever these guys say or whatever anybody says, Stan used to say to me the best band he ever had was the Innovations band. His heart and soul was with using figures. He tried 2 or 3 times afterwards with the different records with just strings alone. But that music was getting where he wanted to get. There was more classical than jazz. And the only other band that's got anywhere near it was the 53 band, when he had Zoot and Real Swingers, Gene Collins, and he had Joey Mulligan writing the charts and people like that. This was a different thing, but I think the Innovations was definitely Stan's number one.
You suggested there that Stan was essentially, basically, deep down a classical music man. Do you mean that?
Yes.
You do?
Yep.
He didn't ever go out and out classical, though, did he?
Well, I mean, you can't go much out and out than Grettinger.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, with Grettinger, he was way out. And I think he was very proud of Grettinger. He wanted it to be established. And he had people like Franklin Marx, who wrote very, very big classical music. He had Bill Russo, who was literally more of a classical musician, if he doesn't mind me saying so.
I do.
Though he wrote some wonderful things in sketches and standards and stuff like that, but I think Bill's greatest forte to music is his classical music. And if I may say so, so is mine.
Well, let's ask him, shall we? Is that true?
Is what true?
You mean you haven't been listening to Vic Lewis?
I was listening, I couldn't hear him.
He was saying basically deep down you're a classical music man.
Yes, but then he said something else.
What did you say? That was a different...
Weren't you listening?
So when was the best band?
He said something was fine.
Yeah.
But what was fine?
It's fine, I can't remember. No, we can't remember.
Play the tape back.
What's that?
The best time of all was the day I joined the band. California was so beautiful in January of 1950. It's hard to believe that we've been there recently. It was fresh and open and clean, and you'd go to Ranch Market and get a glass of orange juice this big, not these little 3-ounce glasses that I'd had all my life. And my wife and I lived with Milt Bernhart and his wife in a rooming house. And this extraordinary orchestra, the Innovations Orchestra, which was presented to those of us who wrote music for it was just an extraordinary occurrence. Of course, I was too young to enjoy myself, if you know what I mean. I suspect you do. I hadn't really developed the ability to take pleasure from things to the degree that I did later. But then to play Carnegie Hall with that orchestra, which we had no clue of the importance. Did we? We just thought it was a gig. We were there playing Carnegie Hall. It's a very important thing to play Carnegie Hall, and there we were in Carnegie Hall. Nobody even looked at the reviews. I don't know whether there were reviews, but I mean, we never saw them. Leo has a couple of reviews. It should be said, though, that all of us joined the band, not all of us, many of us joined the band with great apprehension because we were jazz people, despite what Vic has just told you. I was a Tristano student, and I wanted to play. Lee Konitz was dragged into the band with the most remorse and anger. If you don't remember that, I do, because he didn't forgive me for 2 or 3 years that I had given his name to Stan, and he joined the band. He did brilliantly with the band, in some ways more brilliantly than he had otherwise. But almost everybody in the band wanted to be playing something else. It's true, and that's after a certain period, that band was playing something else. Band very much, I think, sounded at its best when it played Pete Rugelow's pieces. Pete's the genius of the band, I believe, and that's a fact that's sometimes overlooked. But the pleasure of joining the band and playing Carnegie Hall are the two things that stand out in my mind.
Interesting that Grattinger's been mentioned, and you've mentioned the interest of the Innovations Orchestra. From a commercial proposition, of course, it was not good news for Stan, was it?
Mm-mm.
I mean, he might have loved to play that. The musicians might have loved to go out on a limb and play that, but you can't run a band on that sort of music, can you? And it didn't last.
We weren't too crazy about it either. Partly because when you played some of those pieces, you got pains in your fillings. your teeth would start to hurt because of the vibrations that were set up in your mouth.
Well, we had a string section.
Yes.
The Innovation. I wasn't crazy about those guys. They had their own bus, though.
They had their own bus, yeah. That was their bus, and we had the swinging bus.
Can we come on to you with the
Sure.
same question? Can
Don't
you
come on to me, just introduce me.
Sorry.
Okay, we're fine.
That's all right. Precious.
Yes, okay.
Can't take you anywhere, can I?
No. But, you know, in my favorite Kenton band, in my opinion, which I respect. What am I saying? Anyway, I thought the 52, 53 band was sensational. I mean, you know, musicians like Buddy Childers and Bill Russo and Bob Burgess and Frank Rossellino and Lee Konitz and Zoot Sims and Stan Levy. I mean, we had a dynamite band, and I look forward to working with that band night after night. However, the best gigs that I can remember were when we worked Birdland in New York City, when we worked the Blue Note in Chicago. It was, as a matter of fact, we didn't really have a dance book until Bill wrote some arrangements which were danceable and which were very interesting to play. And then I enjoyed the dance gigs that we had because we had something decent to play. But as far as the band dynamics and things like that, I thought it was wonderful. That was by far my favorite Kenton band.
Maybe the favorite Kenton band, but which band did you respect most? Was it not
That band?
That band?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Not that I didn't enjoy the other bands. I thought they were great. But I like the concept. I like the way we were going with that 53 band.
Mm.
It was headed in a great direction. I don't know. I think in some cases, I don't know whether Stan liked the band. He certainly liked the spirit we showed in that band, and that's certainly enough for him to really like the band.
Could you tell when he liked the band particularly?
Oh yes.
What was the reaction from Stanley and Savill?
Oh, his reaction was a great joy. You know,
Smiling.
Absolutely, he was smiling. It was great. I mean, it's a normal reaction when someone is happy with what was going on. Mind you, he still controlled the band, which thank God somebody had some control because we got carried away many times, but. The band was so exciting, and it's about the best big band I've worked with, and I worked with Woody's band, but nothing like the Kenton band in '53, especially when we worked Europe.
Yeah, a lot of people would agree with that.
Oh, it's tremendous.
A lot of us would agree with
Great
that.
personality.
Okay, well, let's hear from someone from behind the scenes. What went on in the background? Which was the easiest and most pleasant band to book, Leo?
Well, I didn't do the booking, Bob. I traveled with the band.
Yeah.
Originally as a band boy. You know, you run errands, you're a golfer, and you're a nursemaid for a bunch of very nice jazz musicians. Well, I want to jump in on your question about favorite band. I particularly liked the first band I joined, which was the 48 Progressive Jazz Band. The band where the uniforms were the ascot necktie ascot tie and the dinner jackets, I guess. But I like that band musically very much. Rugolo did some very nice writing, I thought, with that band. I got to hear it every night. I had to do the lighting and production for all those bands, backstage, of course, you know. It's kind of funny, the things that would go on. But Russo here just mentioned Hollywood in 1950. And I got to tell you, we had a couple of guys on that band, and I'm sitting between, or close to between the two of them. Mr. Russo, who at the time was rooming with Maynard Ferguson. And they both had a little bit of a sick humor going on. We finished a gig at the Palladium. George Morty and I, when we weren't rooming, staying with Stan up on Hollywood Drive, we were all checked into the Vine Motel in Hollywood at the top of Vine Street. And Bill and Maynard were pretty much across the hall from George and myself, George Morton, who was the guy that hired me originally. We come home from a gig at the Palladium, or from the long recording session at Capitol, Melrose. You're ready to go to bed pretty wiped out, you know. We go in. Both of our beds were short-sheeted. Bill Russo was a champion at that, I gotta tell you. One night we came home from the Palladium. I don't know if you were the culprit or not, Russo.
Yeah, it was Maynard.
It might have been. It might have been Bart Barcelona.
I watched them.
And at the Vine Motel in Hollywood, they had a courtyard. When we walked over through the courtyard, there were two beds out in the courtyard. Well, we didn't, you know, late. Somebody, you know, wanted to sleep outside, I guess, that night. So we go up to our room. They're our beds. So we get them back in the room. They're short-sheeted. Yeah. So we put the thing back. I don't know, you were involved in that too, so you had
No, nothing.
You were bad.
Hard to believe.
Then we got over here, Sky King on my right. I don't know if you folks are familiar with Sky King. It was a television show in the States in the 50s. I believe it was a serial, he was an airplane pilot.
A rancher who had an airplane.
That's what it was. And we have Mr. Childers, who had the frustrations of being a rancher with an airplane, only in this case, he had a 1954 Ford. You didn't know you were called Sky King in those days, right?
Oh, yeah.
You did, huh?
I answered to my name. All right.
Yeah, what was that other one they had? It was a champion name for you.
Is that what?
There was another name you had, a nickname.
Oh, yes. We don't need to go into that.
Let's pass on everybody. He's the only one who hasn't spoken. I got an idea that you had a particular affection for the first band you were in, 1943, when you were the kid. Or did your admiration and affection grow over the years?
Well, Bill Russo's mentioning his thrill of the first night that he played with the band reminds me of my thrill of the first night that I played with the band. I had received this call. I had gone and auditioned with the band in, I don't know, November or December of 1942. And Stan was convinced that I was determined to go on the road with somebody, so he decided it might as well be him, because that way I was still ineligible for the draft for at least a year, maybe a year and a half, or over, well, they figured they'd keep me, and it was just what it was a year and a half. And in fact, I've digressed a little bit. I just recently, for the second time in a 60-year career, I was hired because of my age. The king of Siam, Thailand, likes to play jazz, and he likes to have jam sessions, but he doesn't like to have them with people who are much younger than he is because he gets intimidated. And when he found out that I was 74 and I was up for the job, he said, okay, he'll do. So I got to go a wonderful trip, absolutely marvelous, but that's good enough. Let's go back to the beginning. My first night with the band, I was so excited to be joining the band that I really didn't sleep at all the night before I left for Chicago. In order to get to South Bend, you had to go through Chicago. And in 1943, there were no taxi cabs running, and in January of the winter of 42, 43 was really bitter. And I had to walk whatever it was, a mile or two, carrying my horns and my horn, please, and then my horn and my bag. That was it. To the other station, to the Illinois Central station, which was like an elevated platform with no walls or anything, but the lake wind right off the lake, because it was right next to Lake Michigan, the Grant Park. And I'm still not sleepy, and I'm still not worrying about the cold. And I finally get to South Bend, and I go to this hotel, which it was not much of a hotel, but it was a hotel, and I had never been in a hotel before, and I thought, this is wonderful. I'm a country boy. I'm a real hick from the country in southern Illinois, and I go to this hotel. Now, by now, I've not slept for 2 nights, and I see this bed, and it's all mine. I've never had a room like this. I lay down on this bed, and the next thing I know, the phone rang. I said, hello, Marion? I was still Marion in those days, to Stan. And I said, yeah? Oh, this is Stan. Yeah, Stan. How you doing? Okay. How was your trip? Oh, it was fine. You know, we're working tonight. Yeah. Well, we were supposed to start at 9 o'clock. It's 10 after 9 now.
Leo, you want to
So that was my first night with the band. I got started a half hour late. I come wandering in, and that was just the beginning of a lot of weird things that happened.
Buddy, did you feel differently about playing in a hotel or on a stage from broadcasting? Was broadcasting to you an exciting thing to do or not?
I was. We were broken into broadcasting fairly quickly because during the 40s was as a direct outgrowth of the 30s, when radio was was going through its birth pangs. They had a lot of remote things, and one of the things that I had listened to, where I'd heard the Kenton band so many times, was the matinee at Meadowbrook. The show was a very big and popular weekend show on one of the networks, and we played the wartime version of the Meadowbrook, which was a place on the main street in Newark, New Jersey. It was not on the Newark-Pompton Turnpike, where the Meadowbrook actually was. Later on, we did play the real Meadowbrook, but didn't think much about it. It was kind of, I didn't know what it was going to be. It was just like playing another dance set, except there was an announcer up there. But I found myself at the age of 17 being the first trumpet player on the Bob Hope Show, which was like probably the biggest single radio show that was going at the time. And the first experience I had with the pressure of the red light, because even on a recording session, if something got messed up, you could always stop the record and start over. When you were in those days, you're broadcasting airtime now, and 30 minutes later you're off the air, and whatever happened, that was it. That was what you heard was what you did was what you got. So that was kind of exciting, and playing with all those movie stars on the Hope Show, because he saw some gorgeous ladies. You'll never believe how beautiful Gene Tierney really was, or Veronica Lake, or some of the others who were there every week. He had 2 or 3 of those on the show. And it was amazing how much they could get into a half hour of radio. I will never do that. They can't do it now, but they sure did it then. And in fact, a few years later, I did the Jack Smith show, and we averaged about 12 tunes a show in a 15-minute show. I don't know how they did it, but they did, and it didn't seem rushed or anything like that. But 2 singers, either Dinah Shore or Margaret Whiting and Jack Smith. It was the best job in town for the year that I had it. And the times with the band that I like, I agree with Conte, that 53 band, although the 1950 orchestra was an incredible thrill, and the band that we had from 46 to 48 was also a thrill. We played places, the first time to go into Carnegie Hall. We were by far not the first, but we were one of the early ones, because there had only been a couple, Benny Goodman and Duke Ellington, I think, were the only other jazz bands that had played Carnegie Hall when we went in there in 48, 47. And to play, to my knowledge, we were the first jazz band to ever play at the Hollywood Bowl in 1948. And that was a thrill. That kind of stuff was very thrilling. And we played some places in our first European tour in 1953 that were quite impressive. And in fact, that whole tour, such a blur as it is, I kept track. I'm a compulsive counter. And I'll never forget, we played 54 concerts in 44 cities in 35 days. True. And many was the time we played concerts in 2 different countries in the same day, in the same evening. Traveling around Central Europe, that's possible. And I believe I had a line. We went through the Swiss border more times than a smuggler. And it was. I agree with Conte that, in my estimation, I feel that was the best band that Stan ever had, because of the fact that he only had Zoot Sims once. He only had Lee Konitz once, and he had them both there at the same time. And along with them were some other people. I mean, Bill Holman wasn't exactly chopped liver. You know, Bill Holman was playing and writing great. And I can't remember what the other alto player was that we had in Europe, but he was fantastic. David Schildkraut. David Schildkraut was marvelous. And Tony Farina on baritone we had the greatest saxophone section. Stan never had a better one at any point. There were other good ones, but they were good. They were great in different ways. This was my favorite. And the trombones with the people we had there were just wonderful. The trumpet section was just great. The whole band was just wonderful. And Stan Levy, and we had a different guitarist when we went to Barry Galbraith played guitar because our other fellow wouldn't fly, and we had to take an airplane over to Europe. So he stayed by, and we had to suffer through with Barry Galbraith, who was one of the best, finest guitar players of the day. And in many ways, that was just a great experience. But things we did in 1940, from 46 to 48, they were exciting and thrilling too. The band didn't swing as such, but we had music that was so difficult to play, and the actual thrill of it was doing it and doing it well and making it happen, taking this music that was next to impossible to do and making it sound like music. I learned to be a trumpet player with that band. That was my school.
Buddy, you're through?
Exciting voice from the depths.
I don't think that was the best band that he ever had.
Well, you
No,
were.
he always had a...
How would you know? You quit the music business five times before then.
For sure, Leonard Feather didn't like us, the band I was in.
That was
As a matter of fact, Stan came into the Paramount Theater, into the dressing room one day, and he said, "I've got a record made by an English band, and it's amazing about this thing, and let me play it for you guys." And he did, and it was the first time I heard the name Vic Lewis, and Vic had, and I couldn't believe that anybody was that interested in the Kenton band to want to take a couple of Kenton arrangements and do them with his own players, and they were done to a T in some ways better than we had recorded them. And that was Vic, and I think a hand is in order for what Vic did. By the way, can I say one more thing? Conte didn't tell you what other bands he was with. He was with quite a few. Conte played with all the big name bands, Tommy, Jimmy, and Benny. Tommy Reynolds, Jimmy Joy, and Benny Miroff. Don't let anybody kid you, that's something.
Do you
I
remember
played
what
with
the
the
records
Apple
were,
Honey
Bill?
Band.
Do you remember what the records were of Vic's that you listened to? Can you remember?
Yeah, I thought one was collaboration, and it was a trombone solo. Is that true?
Yeah, Gordon.
Who was the soloist?
John Lang.
What was
John
his?
Lang.
Yeah.
Well, his name was Gordon Langholm, but he's through
Don Lang.
John Lang. Yeah.
And it was done very well. And then besides collaboration, and that wasn't an easy piece to do, and it was a hard trombone solo, and he played it beautifully. And the fact that anybody was going to go to that extreme, go to all the trouble and expense to do Kenton music, took us all by surprise. And later on, and not too much later, Vic visited the States and came to Carnegie Hall. And I remember the night we played Carnegie Hall, I was walking up 7th Avenue, and I said to a lady, "How do I get to Carnegie Hall?" And she said, "It's too late, Sonny. It's just too late." She knew how I played. And as a matter of fact, I've never been so frightened as to walk on the stage of Carnegie Hall. I was absolutely petrified, really. It's hard to believe, but it's true. I was petrified most of the time. People thought that was normal, but I was always scared. That's the fact. What do you think, Charlie?
Several of us were petrified.
Let's talk about you. What do you think of me?
I think you're a very funny guy.
It was Milton Berle once that really broke me up. He looked at the band that I was working a Milton Berle show, and he said, "Come on, fellas," he was doing his routine. "Come on, fellas, laugh it up. I laugh when you play." I thought that's one of the funniest things I ever heard.
So, Vic, were you aware of this appreciation that was coming back from across the States? Did it get to you, or did you arrive there to find that people knew who you were?
No, nobody knew who I was. But the funny part about it is I got to Idlewild Airport, as it was then called, which is now Kennedy, and I'm bubbling over to want to go there to get to Carnegie Hall and we'll get to our hotel. And I turned around to the driver and I said, he said, "You come over here for a visit?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I've come over to see Stan Kenton." He said, "Stan who?" I said, "Stan Kenton." He said, "Never heard of him." And I would imagine Lydia was the same thing over there as it was over here. We, all of us, it's part of our life, which it is to a football team, to a cricket team.
Yeah.
All the people that follow those things, that's their life, that's their ambition. But to the outside people, they don't know. They don't know. And I found out it was the same. They didn't know. Of course, when I arranged the exchange with Trujillo, and when Stan came with me, we went to see them and we arranged for the exchange. Harold Davison, who was my agent, turned around and said, "I don't think you better go first. They know more of Ted Heath than they know of you."
Yeah.
Which was a dirty trick in one way, because I'd set the whole thing up with Stan. And Stan said to me, "Do you mind?" I said, "No." I said, if Ted Heath draws more people, then he's the right person to go. But I noticed that they put Nat King Cole with Ted Heath. So which is the answer, you know?
Yeah.
Vic, for the first couple of years that I was with the Kenton band, we were traveling everywhere by train because that was the only transit available, as bad as it was, because the schedules were just thrown out the window. And we would get on the train carrying everything, carrying the bass, carrying the drums, carrying all of the instruments, and invariably someone would stand up or look up and say, hey, what is this, a band or something? And we got to where we'd say, "Yeah," and they'd say, "Whose band is it?" We'd say, "Stan Kenton." "Who?" Because that was always the common answer. Nobody knew us then. The band was only a couple of years old, and the people that we would run into on those trains were not aware of the band, so we just got to where we said, "Stan Kenton, who?"
But surely that changed over the years, didn't it?
Well, by the time it changed, we were already riding on chartered buses. Really.
Sometimes it was Ken Stanton.
Oh, yes. Can't Stand It in his music. We had a lot of names for it.
Stone Ken.
Stone Canyon. Ken Stanton, Can't Stand It. All kinds of different.
Stan Kenton, Chinese band leader.
A little touch of New England humor that I'm trying to get with here. Somebody once reversed the names on the back of the bandstand, and it actually backwards, it's Nat Snotneck. And Stan came back, one of the trumpet players had reversed the letters, because they were reversible letters, Nat Snotneck. Stan was not amused. It was one of those times when he wasn't really thrilled with anything. And as far as the band I was on not swinging, nobody ever told us we had to. I don't remember anybody saying, you guys have got to swing, or we certainly would have.
No,
And with that, I wish you a happy Easter. It's almost Easter, as a matter of fact, isn't it? And you shut up, Leo.
Yeah,
May I ask Charlie Mariano?
sure. Use the mic.
Charlie Mariano, I haven't seen you in 35 years, man. Your former roommate, Joe Schiavone, wants me to ask you the following question. He wants to know, Joe Schiavone wants to know, how come you married the enemy?
No answer to that.
she wasn't until later.
Leo, we were talking about broadcasting earlier. Talking about Leo.
Yes.
Wait. All right. Okay.
Leo, how are you?
I'm well, Charles. And
What do
you?
you mean, how are you?
I'm happy to see you're still alive. Like all of us, yeah. Nice.
I hear you're coming to Boston.
Yes.
Yeah, we're
Next
gonna have
month.
a big party.
Yeah, okay. It's my first gig in the States in something like 30 years.
The last time I saw Charlie Mariano, he had just came in from Japan, I believe. You played Boots Missouri. I put on actually a testimonial for the late great Boots Missouri alto player, who was quite ill at the time, passed away from cancer. That was the last time I saw Charlie Mariano. He and Herb Pomeroy and a bunch of guys came out and did this benefit for Boots. And that was in 1967, Charlie, and then you split.
Yeah.
Where did you go?
Yeah, well, I had to come here to work because America sucks.
Stripping down.
That was my next question. How come you went to, where did you go? Germany, I guess. That's
Leo.
where you've been?
Where'd you go?
Leo.
Germany, yes.
We were talking broadcasting. earlier, and we were talking about Kenton being. We're talking about Kenton not being known to some people. Was it difficult to get negotiations going on with the broadcasting companies, with NBC and things? Did they want Kenton, or was he forced?
Actually, no. That happened quite accidentally. We, unknown to us, had a fan and a friend at the National Broadcasting Company. His name was Bob Wogan. And Bob heard a broadcast one night from the Blue Note in Chicago. And it seems to me this was just before the concert in miniatures. What happened was we were doing just a thing that the Blue Note had set up for broadcast for whatever kind of publicity reasons. And the way we opened the show, Stan said to the guys, just do whatever you want to do. And I remember Conte, and he was just sitting there warming up. I'm in the back room and I'm listening to this thing over the earphone. What's going on? Where's the theme song?
Can't hear you.
There was no theme song. It was just all this, background music going on. And then Stan came in and started introducing the band, and went on. And the guy in New York was listening to this thing and loved the way it happened. So Stan got a call a couple of hours, an hour and a half later, and he told me to call Bob Wogan in New York the next day, because he wanted to talk about doing a show. And that's how the concert in miniature thing came about. There was no problem at all as far as getting the thing going with NBC. Some of the places we played in were trying to get a balance was a little bit difficult, like Birdland. That ceiling was so low in there, and the band sounded like it was playing under a mattress. Finally, I discovered that they had an echo chamber over at NBC. Rockefeller Center, and sometimes we'd work it out so that Johnny Richards would go over to NBC, or I would go over to NBC, over to Rockefeller Center. And either one of us would give the engineer cues at Birdland, but we'd shoot it into an echo trunk, and then it would go out on the transmitter. And some of the balances weren't bad, actually. Some of them were really awful, but that's to be expected doing one-night stands in bad places, you know. But to answer your question, Bob, there really was no problem with that. It all just happened, like I said, purely accidental.
But it caught on, didn't it?
Yeah, it sure did.
They were regular. Regular work was necessary. Yeah.
Yeah, except it wasn't paid. There was no, buddy, you never got a check for playing any of those concert miniature things, did you?
Neither that nor the records that they made from him.
Yeah, that's the thing that bugs me. The bootleg thing, you know. I've got at home on the floor in my closet 11 shows. I believe most of them were done. They were done in May, June, and July of 1953. I think the majority of them came out of Atlantic City, New Jersey. And some of them were Treasury shows. But they're laying there, and I finally decided I don't want the bootleggers to have them, so I willed them to Smithsonian Institute. And that's where they're going to go, and hopefully they will be put out in decent CDs. At least it'll be done correctly, I think, if they can clean them up well enough.
That's where we all should go, to the Smithsonian Institute. They have, you know, the little jars with...
I don't know about me, but I know that's...
There's Conte Candoli, I remember him. Can I bring up a name, Bob, that will get a rise out of everybody? Maynard Ferguson, who doesn't get mentioned, and I'm sure he's been invited if you can find him. He's kind of hard to find. Maynard lives in the forest these days, but when he joined the band, it was quite a revelation to everybody. And for us, and getting used to Maynard in the band, it took a while. This man had so much going for himself, and for instance, at first he played so high that only dogs could really hear him. There were 3 or 4 collies in Idaho that formed a fan club for Maynard, and he ended up marrying a couple. And I don't care if he gets mad. I sent him for a loaf of bread 30 years ago to the corner, and I haven't seen him since. And it's almost the true story. I haven't seen Maynard for ages. It's very difficult now because he's gone into another phase of life, but Maynard is unique in every way. And nowadays all trumpet players are playing high and higher, but Maynard really was. Cat Anderson, of course, also, but in a different way. Maynard was stupendous, and it always came out. It was fantastic night after night. Probably the biggest thrills I got was sitting in the band with this guy listening to him play night after night. It was worth paying for, really. I enjoyed the Maynard Ferguson years very much. But he got away from us, didn't he?
Yeah. You remember the night he fell off the bandstand?
Is that what did it? I knew it was something.
But he got right up and kept on playing, man, up there and wherever it is.
He fell off the bandstand.
Can I add this? Maynard changed my career. He changed the entire direction because until he joined the band, I was the high note player.
The high note player.
He joined the band, and I said, "Oh, well, now what am I going to do? Well, I guess I'll be a first trumpet player, and I'll try to be the best one I can." And you can make a lot more money as a lead trumpet player in the studios than you can as a section player, because they like the section to be made up completely of lead trumpet players. So that changed my direction completely and changed my whole career. Every idea that I had, and rightly so, because the way he does it, no one else that I've heard has really done it like Maynard.
You know, I got to tell you a story about Maynard and the old man and myself. Maynard would go down in front and do his stuff and do it very well and exciting and break it up. Well, on some occasions I had to follow him and go down and do my stuff, which is consists of playing a muted trumpet behind a trombone section or something like that. And I really got pissed off. And I went to the old man. I said, man, I can't stand it. He said, what's wrong? He says, well, you know, what good am I doing here? I'm playing my sweet jazz and my stuff like that. Maynard goes down and plays a couple high notes and he breaks it up. Well, the old man almost fired me. He says, how dare you say that? He was irate. He said, don't ever say that. I got you with the band. I love the way you play, and don't ever change it. And that's the end of it, man. And that was it. He set me straight, and I felt really great after that. Really did.
I wish I had talked to him.
Conte, how did he fit in with the rest of the players? Was he resented at all?
Who? Maynard?
Maynard.
No, he was loved by everyone.
Maynard was wonderful.
Great guy.
Yeah, but he was a Canadian. That didn't help.
Oh, that's true.
Canadians are very peculiar. They don't see things really the way we do.
Yeah, I first met
As soon as I found out how we see things, well, I'll let you know. But
Bernhart and Shelley Mann were really the spark
Man.
up there. You know, they really had that thing going. With a sense of humor and that youthful exuberance. Although maybe even Russo, you had that youthful exuberance.
In those years, Maynard didn't drink. He didn't smoke. He didn't do anything but just play like he did. We called him Fresh Air Ferguson, the Hot Canary.
That's right. Did you make a record by that name, the Hot Canary?
He did. I think with
Yes, he
Jimmy
did.
Dorsey.
yeah.
Yeah, you remember when Maynard's mother and dad were on the road with him?
Always, every summer. They were both school teachers.
Yes.
They played higher than he did. The old man could really, he taught Maynard everything he knew, which was not a lot, really. Buddy, do you remember when, and I'm changing the subject because it's necessary, isn't it really? Remember the night that an announcer said, because he was in a remote place, he was announcing the band broadcast from from the studio, and we were on a bandstand, and the announcer saw the name of the next soloist and said, ladies and gentlemen, next number features the lovely Kay Winding.
Yes.
And he did. It's a well-known fact. The lovely. After that, it became Kai Winding, but even I hadn't met him yet, and I thought that must be a girl, and it was anything but. Kay Winding is important, very important. It'll come up in my little discussion about trombones, but of course, Winding was the one that blasted the hole in the mountain and made it happen. And interestingly for me, he never played anywhere else like Kay Winding as he did on Kenton's band. He was on other bands and he went to New York. Then there was JJ and Kay, and his style of playing pretty much changed, didn't it? But on Kenton's band, it was wide open for him, and it really made the difference. It made all the difference for trombone players.
Yeah, he
was a
style.
unique player and a great one.
Now,
And
personal question.
I rest my case.
How did you rate Skip Lake as a trombone?
He was on the band at the same time,
Yeah.
and he played the equivalent of Maynard Ferguson. It was the sound of an elephant coming over the mountain. And what you can do with that in a musical arrangement is hard to say. I've got an example on tape, and those who come will hear it. And it's pretty stupendous, and it was only a matter of how to use that. He was really an old-fashioned trombone player. He played in a semi-Dixieland way. He was older than we were by a few years, and a very good player, and he just had this ability, if you're a trombone player, don't try this. He could unhinge his throat to get the sound out. When you attack a note, you use your tongue and you go ta. But in order for Skip Layton to get the note out, he had to actually open the throat and go ha from down in his stomach. And what resulted was the darndest sound one ever heard. And it did resemble an elephant. But he could articulate and play melodies, and we have a few of them. And I found one that is on a recently released transcription release of Kenton transcriptions. It's got some great stuff on it. And
Because it was such a wonderful job to be in location in New York City for what, 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever it was, depending on who was on
8, 10 weeks,
on the 6th floor.
6, 7 shows a day
Yes.
for 10 weeks.
I wish Al Porcino was here,
No days off.
because I was not there, but I heard this story from a very dear friend of all of ours, George Morte. In 1947, at the Paramount Theater, you guys remember how that bandstand worked?
Oh, yeah.
You know, the dressing room, folks, was on the 6th floor, and the bandstand was in the basement. So the bell would ring, and the guys had to get on the elevator, get down there on time to get ready to get on the bandstand, because if you didn't get on that bandstand, once it started going, forget it, there was no way to get on it. And Al Porcino, that wonderful lead player, buddy, you and Al worked together.
Oh, yes.
The story goes, and I find no reason not to believe this story. But Charlie, you can ask Al when you get back to Germany, maybe. The bell rang, Al grabbed his horn, he had his ascot tie on, blue jacket, but no gray pants. And he got down there in the basement to get on the bandstand and realized he didn't have any pants on. So, I think you might have been on that band, buddy. Do you recall? It was 1947, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Maybe with Nat Cole. I'm not sure. Or Victor Moore. Or Victor Moore. Yeah.
What happened?
Well, what happened? He didn't get on the bandstand. There's no way he could on.
They put his name on the marquee for the next 2 weeks. Trumpet player with no pants. I don't remember. I was there. And this is a pack of lies, Liam. But what did happen, I can tell you, is that on one occasion, the bandstand came up out of the pit, and there had been a party. It was New Year's, and they threw a party at New Year's, and everybody was 2 floors upstairs, and 4 people made it to the pit for the stage to go up. And anybody in the audience that was greeted by a bandstand that was empty except for 4 people, I was one of them. Shelley Mann, not Stan Kenton, no saxophones, 2 trombones, Harry Forbes and me, and we endeavored to play the opening number. and we were doggedly determined. And the rest of the band joined us when we got to the level of the stage. Imagine the sight of about 16 people filing onto the stage to join
Climbing
the band.
over the back of it and jumping down. I was one of them.
And I've never been so humiliated in my life. But the sound, I would love it because I think something new was discovered. 2 trombones, a drummer, and I'm not sure what else. Not too many. We weren't sure what to do. I thought about being funny. But in those days, it was only funny when I played.
Milt?
Hey, Milt, can you imagine doing the Paramount Theater now, 6, 7 shows a day? It was brutal.
That's correct.
It was really punishment. You know, we were so dumb we didn't know it.
6 or 7 shows.
Remember when Bart Barcelona used to lose his arms weren't long enough quite, and he used to lose the slide, and this pit had risen up like 10 or 12 feet above the front row. And he'd lose the slide and he'd go flying out. Well, the first time this young girl returned it to him, he had a whole new approach to beating women. It happened fairly often after that.
Folks, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a slide head for the audience. The trajectory was fabulous. It went 20 rows out. And it was one of those days when the Paramount Theater wasn't doing so well. It was practically an empty house, or somebody would have died. It hit a seat and almost buried itself in the seat. Somebody brought it to him, although Bart did try to get out of the pit and get into the audience to collect the slide. And somebody suggested that he keep playing the hell with the slide.
Another nice bandstand was that one at the Click Restaurant in Philadelphia.
Oh yeah.
Right, about a lifetime ago, I got a nudge from Bill next to me here. He wanted to say something. He hasn't had a chance for obvious reasons. But we will be featuring Bill and indeed for our sins, Milt as well, tomorrow afternoon together in an extended interview. And I think you will enjoy that, because Bill will be able to say all the things he hasn't been able to say today, if he can get a word. That's tomorrow afternoon. Meanwhile, we've got another panel in about 10 minutes' time, and that's it from the first panel. It has been superb to meet them all. You can go up and chat and ask whatever questions you like outside in the lobby. But for now, it's thank you to Milt, to Charlie, to True.
Could I come back and talk about 1958 and 59?
I don't care what they say, Bill, that was the best Kenton band.
To Vic, to Bill, to Conte, to Leo, and to Buddy. Thank you very much indeed. Band in May 1970. Quite soon, he was co-leading the band with Dick Shearer, when unfortunately Stan hit a patch of bad health. I think we all remember that time. It was thanks to him that the Kenton band kept on the road, honoured its bookings, and maintained all the college clinics that were so dear to Stan's heart. He left the Kenton band in September 1972, and it's his first time at a Rendezvous event. I know that he's written on the net, some of the best audiences we ever had were in Britain. We can prove that to him this weekend. So Mike, we've asked them to come all here to see you today. So Mike Vax, welcome to the program. And finally, somebody who was first time here in 1998, I remember him well, and you will too if you were in on that session. He joined the band in 1959 and then rejoined in 1972. He's had several spells at different times with Stan. The last one, 74, and Jerry has worked outside music in the police force. In the police force? A different kind of beat, he said. He was also featured on 2 back-to-back Grammy albums, the West Side Story and Adventures in Jazz. So ladies and gentlemen, a great pleasure to welcome back Jerry McKenzie. Now, we've gone out of sequence because I've been longing to speak to this man for years and years and years. He joined Stan in 1952. As soon as the US Army heard about it, they drafted him. But he'd done his stint by 54 and he was back with Stan as lead alto. And for most of 1955, he and Charlie Mariano were in the same section. Had there been a more powerful pair of alto players ever. Lennie wrote increasingly for Stan and supplied countless arrangements of standards. It's 2 every week for the library of the Mellophonium Band. He stopped playing his alto and was busy writing for television and films in the 70s, and he's been musical director and composer for Clint Eastwood since the early 80s. And I do know that Murray's been trying to get him to come along here, and always it was a Clint Eastwood film that stopped him coming before. A few years ago he composed his own tribute to Stan, I Remember Stan, and artistry in Kenton too, I believe. His film score commitments, as I said, stopped him being here in 1998, but happily things have worked out for us. He's here for us today. Please give a special welcome to the great Lennie Niehaus. Yes, we're side by side. By side. Right, let's have a look. Well, now, I never have... Oh, just let me finish my coffee. Stone cold, but never mind. Thank you. It's lovely. Never let it be said that I'm that ingenious or inventive in that I will think of a new question to start the second board with, because the first one was so profitable and brought out so many stories. I see no harm in starting that one with this particular session. I have been requested to start at the other end of the panel this time. The question again was of the bands, and we'll I don't expect you to answer this, really, because it doesn't really apply, but listen carefully. I may ask you something about it. Which of the many bands, or the many eras of Kenton orchestras over the years, has a particular meaning to each member of the panel? Which was their favourite? Which was the most disastrous? Which was the most interesting? We hope we may hear something of all of those things. First of all, let's ask Jerry McKenzie.
Apparently there was some confusion on the first panel, so I'm going to set the record straight. Those gentlemen were very, very confused. There were two great bands, great, the greatest, and I was on both of them. Obviously, because I went on the band twice. All kidding aside, one of my favorite bands, which I believe I told you people last year, for the people who were here last year, and that was the 1956 band with Mel Lewis, who was my favorite big band drummer, was the Contemporary Concepts album, which I told you about, which was writing by Bill Holman. And of course, Bill Russo. I'm not going to set Bill Russo aside. I've played Bill's charts, but not extensively. But that band I thoroughly enjoyed. But in '59, when I was on the band, it was a favorite of mine, along with 1972, because there were two different things going on at that time. I was blessed and fortunate enough to record a second double package album with the band, with the Four Freshmen. That was live at Butler University. There was two double package albums. They were recorded in quadraphonic, which was my first experience at that, and I would tell you some stories about that, but that would take too long. But if I had a favorite, I would say probably, it's so difficult to really pinpoint it down, but the two bands that I was on, I really had a great time. I was fortunate enough to know a multitude of musicians that came on and off the band, just too numerous to mention. One of who is sitting on this panel with me, that I can't tell you how much I enjoyed his music. It was like he almost wrote for drummers, because I knew when Lennie's shout chorus was coming, I didn't have to read it. I could sing it to myself, with all due respect to this gentleman, and it was Lennie Niehaus's charts, which I was blessed in recording some of Lennie's tunes. So enough for me. Thank you.
Jerry, thank you. Mike, can I ask you to keep a little bit away from the mic? It's a bit oversensitive, okay?
Okay.
It's nothing personal.
Well, it's first of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and for me, I guess, being the baby of this whole thing, it's maybe a little bit different story, because I grew up with Stan Kenton as my idol from the time I was about 12 years old, and started listening to his albums in the mid-50s, and so every band's my favorite. You know, I mean, I just, probably if somebody put a gun to my head and said, you have to give me a favorite album, I would say Cuban Fire. Yeah. For me, it was just such remarkable music. But the first time I got to hear the band live was 1960. I heard the Road Show, and a bunch of those of us who played in our dance band in the high school saved our money and brought dates and sat as far back in the balcony as you could afford, you know, the cheapest seats at the Oakland Auditorium. And I was already just a Kenton fanatic. And I remember that when that concert was over, I looked at everybody and I said, I'm going to play on that band someday. And it became the most important thing in my life. And then I was lucky enough that summer in 1960 to be a student at the second Stan Kenton Clinic at Indiana University. So I was there sort of in the beginning of all the educational stuff as a student. But it was a very strange thing, because the band wasn't on tour that year and in the summertime, so the faculty was an all-star faculty. And I must tell you that my trumpet teacher at that camp was Conte Candoli. So that was 40 years ago. And so anyway, I got so involved in all of that, and Conte and Jimmy Maxwell, Kansas Jimmy Maxwell, was playing lead trumpet on the band for the faculty, faculty band. And here I was, this 17-year-old kid, and it was the first time I was away from home, and I'd ridden a train from Oakland to Chicago and then down to Bloomington, Indiana, and scared kid. And so I went into my audition, and they auditioned me, and they said, that's great, and they sort of took me under their wing, and here I was, as I say, this 17-year-old kid, and they put me in the faculty band. So I was playing every night with the Kenton Orchestra that was the faculty band, with people like Conte and Jimmy Maxwell and Sam Donahue and Sal Salvatore and Eddie Safransky and on, all these people who were my idols. Every night I was shaking in my boots, you know. But the other part of that was we were never supposed to leave the campus. That was part of the rules, you know, you signed when you will never leave the commons of Indiana University. Well, Conte and Jimmy took a liking to me, and there was this bar that they liked to go to at lunchtime. So I would go with them every day. We would sneak off campus. They were cool. They didn't let me drink, you know. I had a hamburger and a Coke and got trumpet lessons every day for 2 weeks from Conte and Jimmy. I never forgot that. And of course, along with that, one of the things that I must say is that part of the reason that I wanted to become a lead trumpet player was Buddy Childers, because boy, he was my idol. So I mean, it's a pleasure, first of all, for me to even be involved in all of this, because, like I say, I'm one of the younger guys. But probably for me, playing on the band that in 71 and 72, when we came to England, that band stayed together without, very few people left the band for almost 2 years. And you know, we thought we were swinging pretty good. We were playing a little bit different stuff than a lot of you were used to, in that we were playing a lot of Hank Levy time charts, and some of the music was a little bit based on rock, you know. I mean, we were doing MacArthur Park and Hey Jude and all those kind of things. Some of the Kenton fans said, "Where has Stan gone with all this?" You know. But I couldn't give you one favorite band, only because, as I say, from the time I was 13 years old, every band that he ever had was my favorite.
Thank you, Mike. Very good. I must say, when I came back to England in 1961, a very good friend of mine and myself went to see every Kenton concert we could actually get to. And I had him on LBC several times, Stan, and had several interviews with him. One of them was an hour-long interview, which I've still got on tape somewhere. And he always spoke with great respect of our next guest. And I must say, when Don and I went to these concerts, it's the way Stan said, that solo was by Gabe Baltazar. You could tell he felt something. Gabe, you.
It's a real honor to play. Well, first I got to say, aloha. I'm not Don Ho, but I work with Don too. But that's our way. That's the way we usually greet people when you come to Hawaii. But anyway, I grew up as a musician. My dad was a musician, and he played saxophone. And when World War II broke out, there were many jazz musicians that were stationed there, including Artie Shaw had a band there, and Claude Thornhill, and quite a few others. And Henry Coco's playing trombone there, and some of the clubs there. A whole slew of them. Well, anyway, every time I heard jazz, I got excited. I haven't heard about Stan yet. And when I went to the Hawaii Theater during, I think it was 1945 or 46, I saw this movie, and they have a short subject, you know, and it was Stan Kenton. And when I heard that band, I said, wow. Like anything else, it was just hypnotizing. And I said, this is the band I'd like to get into one of these days. I hope so. And I was playing Hawaiian music and everything, you know. But I don't think it hurt my playing. But but I love Hawaiian music also. So anyway, and I kept practicing, like they say, practice and practice and practice, and listen and listen and listen, and heard Lennie's band, his octet. I heard Charlie Mariano's LPs, and they were all, I heard them all, because we used to have a little jam session in a little place called Waimanalo, a little country town. We'd go out there and jam, and we'd meet a lot of the servicemen who were stationed there. And that's how I got to find out what bebop was, and Dizzy Gillespie, and Charlie Parker, and Lester Young, and name them all, you know, and Stan Kenton, of course. And then I said, I was in the Royal Hawaiian Band later on. It was a steady gig. It was a civil service band. It was the only band in the United States that was a full-time musical band, which was not in the service. And I had a job there. I was set for life, but I couldn't stand playing Aloha Oe every day, you know. I told my wife, I said, I gotta get out of here. I'm going to Hollywood, either in Hollywood, New York. I want to play some jazz and really surprise my life. And I think I can do it. And I enrolled in City College, and I met Bill Trujillo there and all that. We all hung out there, Bob Florence, etc. And we were all in the same band under Bob McDonald, the band teacher. And that's my environment in Los Angeles. And working down there, and one day I heard the telephone ring, and I said, hello. And he said, hello, this Gabe Baltazar? I said, yes. This is Stan Kenton. My eyes went out like that. I said, right? Oh, wow. You know, I was working with Russ Morgan then, you know. And like a good Hawaiian voice, I said, yeah, what can I do for you, Stan? He says, are you available? Lennie Niehaus just left the band, and I've had some good recommendation that you can fill that chair. I said, well, I went hoo-hawing around, you know, like a good Hawaiian boy. I don't want to leave another band and say, you know, give my notice and all that. And later on, he said, well, think about it and give me a call. And gave me his number. And 5 minutes later, I said, wow, I think that call is one of my favorite bands, you know. And I did call him, and he said, come on down and audition with the band. And I got the band. And the rest is history, because Stan made my career, really. And he made a lot of careers for everybody that was in the band. And I'm grateful, and I feel everybody's grateful. And I got to meet you all. I'm here in England, and I'm so happy. I've been all over the world with Stan, and it was a musical treat of my life, which I will never forget. And once again, I'd say aloha.
Thank you, Gabe. Now just think about it. 1952 was when our next guest got involved with Stan. 1952, it's a long time ago, then.
Very long, yes, it was.
So, what about this?
I was
favorite
16.
band?
You want to hear about 52 or?
Oh, well, the start of that.
Okay, 52. I was in college, and Stan asked me to play with that. What was it called? The neophonic? Not the neophonic. The orchestra with strings, and everybody said, "Stay in school, stay in school." And I played oboe and other instruments at the time. So I stayed in school, but I said, I'll never get another chance again. And as soon as I graduated, I went to college for 5 years. I got a call from Stan. Bob Allison was his manager then. And he said, we'd like you to try out for the band. And we're rehearsing at a place called Florentine Gardens. It was on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood. So I went down and I took my horn out, and the first thing I get up on the bandstand, and he had commissioned Jerry Mulligan to write 10, 12 arrangements. So the first thing he called was Limelight. I had an alto solo. And I'm reading the part, the first chorus, we're playing ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da, the melody, and I say, oh God, here comes the solo. The first solo is an alto solo, so I played that solo. And I think this is, to me, it was a first, because there was always a first alto who played just strictly first alto until Charlie and I played together, which was mentioned, and we both split the lead alto book and we split the jazz. But then at that time in 1952 there was lead alto and first alto. Like before I joined the band, a lot of the guys had left the band, and Art Pepper and Bud Shank was a lead alto player and Art Pepper was a jazz alto player. Anyway, I played this jazz solo. And then he said, let Lennie play lead on this Deep Purple, which was an arrangement that Bill Holman had written. I think it's his first arrangement recorded in Steve Harris's book. And so I said, lead? Okay. So I played lead, and so we played a few more tunes. And then he said, hey kid, come on, I want to talk to you. We were sat in the booth, And he said, I really like the way you play. And I looked up at this guy, and it was, you know, God, he's, you know, what an idol. And he's what a big guy. And I thought, he sure is old, you know. I think I was 21 at the time. And so he said, I'd like you to play with my band. I said, I'd love to, and all that. So I find out later he's 39. So, but to me, you know, 21-year-old. Anyway, that's how I joined the band. And I was in the band. I was deferred while I was going to the college. And they caught me, and I was in Boston, and I befriended Conte Candoli, and Leo Curran, you met on the last session. And they took me to the airport, and I said, I'll be back. So the other question I think you were asking, what was the favorite band? One of my favorite bands was the band I wasn't in, which was between 52 and 54. I was in the Army, and they had Zoot Sims and Lee Konitz and all these marvelous players, Conte and Rosalino on trombone and Stan Levy on drums. It was really a swinging band. And luckily, I got out of the Army in 1954, and Lee had left the band. I went right back with the band, and I was with the band for 5 years. And I was playing with the band, and we would play concerts, and we'd play dances. At the time, I think Stan had 4 tunes which he had written, the arrangements of. And one was Street of Dreams, there was Under a Blanket of Blue, we sang September Song, and I think there was one other. And after that, there was nothing that the people could dance to. So I decided to write an arrangement of a tune that would sound like Stan Kenton, but it would be something that people could dance to. It would be jazz solos in it. That was Pennies from Heaven. And I wrote a couple of other arrangements. And I left that with the band. I went into the Army. And a year later, I'm on furlough, and I hear it on the jukebox. And I was with my wife, Pat, who's with me tonight after all these years. And so I said, it sounds like my arrangement. That sounds like my arrangement. I didn't know that they recorded it. And I was thrilled. And I hear that they did it in one take. Buddy was playing lead trumpet. And they had, again, 2 altos, Vinnie Dean and Lee Konitz. And I hear that Lee Konitz grabbed the lead part and said, let me play lead on this. And Vinnie looked, oh, okay. So I loved the way Lee Konitz played. And I understand he wasn't too happy with the band. He was, you know, he's used to playing with the rhythm section, but he sounded great. So then I went back with the band and played, and we were the first band to come, as you know, to England. I made that tour, and I met a couple people that came up 44 years ago. I saw you at Royal Albert Hall, and and they said, you played Cherokee very fast. And I guess, I don't know if it's a surprise, but Murray asked me to play Cherokee on the big band night that I'm conducting. And so I might, 44 years ago, I'll take it at a metronome 44 beats slower. I'm going to try to play it as fast as I did then. But anyway, it was very thrilling time with the band until 59, and then I decided to go back to Hollywood. And Stan was starting the Mellophonium band, and he said, I'd like you to write arrangements for the Mellophonium band. And I said, well, what tunes do you want? He says, anything you want. I said, well, what if it's something you already have in the book? Doesn't matter. And so I went home. I was writing 2 or 3 arrangements a week. And I said, when do you want me to stop? He said, well, just keep going. And I wrote like 2 or 3 arrangements. And so he recorded that band. And that was a lot of fun. So I contributed a lot of arrangements to the band. But it was one of the highlights in my life. And later I went into other fields which were very thrilling. But I started playing my horn again about 12, 14 years ago, and it's really thrilling to be able to play again. And it's really thrilling to be here to talk to the people that I met before. They came out to Newport Beach and Redondo Beach, and that answers all my questions.
That's very good. Thank you. Just before we leave, Lennie, can I just ask whether it was any more disconcerting or complicated for you to write for a mellophonium band because of the extra instrumentation? Was it more difficult?
Actually, it was. It added a new dimension to the band. I could get into, which I probably will. I'm on a panel with Bill Russo, but Stan hated clarinets, so the sax section never played anything but saxophones. You know, no flutes, no clarinets, and he hated the cup mute for the trumpet. But we got around that by writing unison, one trumpet in a straight mute and one trumpet in a cup mute. So it gave it a different color. It was like two instruments playing the same line, but it sounded like another instrument. So, but by adding the mellophoniums, Stan, the thing that Stan's band was really known for was its highs and extreme lows, and it kept getting higher when you got high note trumpet players, and it kept getting lower. There were baritone sax, then there were baritone and bass saxophone. Then he added a tuba to the trombone section. So the trumpets were up here and the low instruments were here, and by adding the mellophoniums, it filled in the space between the trumpets. I'm blocking my face. It filled in the space between the trumpets and trombones. So the mellophoniums were here, and it's a very legitimate thing where French horns at an orchestra would play a unison line, so we had 4 mellophoniums. So while the band was playing and it got a little swingy or hot and you wanted maybe a more melodic line, we could write it for the 4 mellophoniums. But in a vertical writing where everybody played a swinging thing, we had trumpets, mellophoniums, and trombones. It was a great big sound. But the saxes really had to blow hard because we had, at first we had 10 brass behind us, and now we had 14. Then he dropped one saxophone and added some bongos and things. So the saxes we had to blow pretty hard, especially when we had the 4.
Thanks, Lennie. Some saxes and bongos and things. Yeah. Well, now, Lennie was associated first in 1952, and in fact, our next guest book won in 1956. I turned to Leslie to ask her really, which is it tactless to ask you the years with which you actually made contact with the band and in that you travelled with them for a while?
Oh, no, not at all.
Good.
But pretty much, almost from the beginning.
Was it?
As you know, I was born the same month as the band. And my father always said I was a constant reminder to him of his age. I did not go to school until I was about 10, which meant that I traveled on the road. Very unusual existence. I remember 6 months where I never saw the sun except at the other end of the day. I listened to his music and I heard his theme song about 4 times a night. And this was in amusement parks, in clubs, in dance halls, in concert halls. And every time I heard Artistry and Rhythm, I got chills.
Oh, really?
And you know, I still get chills whenever I hear it. In fact, I just got a chill talking about it. It's hard for me, you know, it's very interesting speaking. I mean, I like Lennie, I loved the 1953-54 band. I thought it was wonderful. But I lived all this stuff from the inside. I mean, I was the one that in the middle of the night would be awakened by him messing about on the piano and saying, "What do you think of this?" I mean, I was the one that he would put his head in my lap at the age of 10 or 11 and cry because he would be frightened that he couldn't go forward and didn't know where he was going. He was a very complex man, a great leader of people, and as all of you, I think, experienced a great empowerer of talent in people. But he was also a very deep and a very, in many ways, rather tortured man, as I think real artists are. And by real artists, what I mean are people that are really striving to actually bring something into form that carries with it the smell of what is valuable, what really matters. And that means a lot of experimentation. It means making a lot of mistakes, and it means always be willing, I think, and I think he was too, to walk away from what you've done well in order to try something new, even if it meant that you would be highly criticized for it. I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about with him. And one of the things that's always slightly irritated me amongst the pompous critics that write about him, who I must say, critics are critics, but you know, musicians, I think, are of a higher order of being, I have to say. Thank you for that. Yeah, let's hear that. Is that, you know, that no one understood. The moment you become a public persona, you're up there to actually be shot at or to be played with or whatever. And from my point of view, I actually lived his struggles and his grief, I suppose because I was the one that was kind of closest to him during my childhood, certainly. So I don't think I have a favorite type or time, but I remember, you know, I would awaken in the night. He was a wonderful piano player, and he was very shy about it. All you know, that worked with him. And he was a bit, you know, I wrote my first novel about Beethoven, who strangely enough was the same way. I don't know if you know this, but Beethoven, you could never get him to play at parties in Vienna. What you would have to do is you'd have to sit him down at the piano and then ignore him completely. And then you'd find him going like this. And provided, but you couldn't ask him. If you asked him to play, he wouldn't do it. And he was like that. And in the middle of the night, I mean, I would be awakened by him playing something very melodic. He was a very romantic man with all of his external, you know, male leader, warrior toughness. Underneath, there was this deep romantic stream, which I think you can hear in a lot of his music. And this was mostly middle of the night stuff. So, I mean, I suppose, in a way, my greatest love of his music was my love of the man and my awareness of his passion to find new ways of doing things, to touch new elements of being, to try to put them into some sort of a form. And I think he was a man of enormous courage. And, you know, to me, all of the things that he did were wonderful. I remember Bob Rettinger, when he came along, which was very, very experimental, you know, City of Glass and all of that. And I remember saying to my father, my God, why does he have such long hair? This was long before, you know, the 60s when people had long hair. And my father believed in him and did everything that he could to help him to do what he had to do, which I think is a great gift, you know. So I think the music inspires a lot of people. Those of you who've worked with him, who've met him, are ceaselessly been inspired by his warmth, his sense of humor. Sure. He had a brilliant sense of humor. You know, I knew him more as a man and the music from inside. Is that a good enough answer?
Yes, it's a very good answer.
There you go.
I remember quite clearly when Stan took the band to Ronnie Scott's. I took my daughters along to educate them, right? And went round to say hello afterwards. When he heard they were there, he said, bring the family in, bring the family in. And he was so warm and nice and pleasant. So, did you never have the urge to get out front and sing?
One time, when I was 15 years old, I was singing. We were driving along. We used to have a lot of funny things we did, because there was a lot of rivalry between us. And this time, we were driving from Los Angeles up to the San Joaquin Valley, which is about a 4-hour drive, over some very high mountains. We had the top down. Neither of us ever liked to admit that we would give in to anything. All of us would both of us trying. And he said to me, are you cold? The snow is coming down. And I'm singing, right? And I said, no, not at all. I'm freezing, in fact. Not at all. He said, no, neither am I. Absolutely not. Right? So we're driving on. And by this time, the snow is filling, you know, this convertible. It was a Lincoln, a blue Lincoln convertible. And I'm singing, just for the fun of singing, you know. And anyway, finally, in the end, he gave up and put the top up. ostensibly because he didn't want me to get cold. Yes. And he said to me, "My God, you have a wonderful voice." Now, that's the only time he has ever said anything like that to me at all. I did sing, actually, when I was in university. I went to Stanford University, and I used to earn money at the weekend singing. I thought it was great fun. I wanted to be a musician, but I wanted to play the flute, the violin, and the harp, and he would have none of it. If I played the trumpet or the trombone, it was fine, but that was the end of my musical career.
June Christie got the job, Tom.
Yeah.
Right, let's turn to Jim. 1956, Jim, and onwards. And you changed direction, didn't you? Well, not changed direction, you took it on as well, road manager as trumpet. Bit of a hefty thing to do, wasn't it, at that time?
Yes, it was. I have said many times that I would not have stayed on the band had I not done something else than play 35, 45 arrangements per night, dance, job, or concert, less than that. But Kent Larson was the road manager before I became road manager and band manager. And I did it for about 3, 4 years, whatever it was, 3 maybe. And I went to Stan because Stan had been handling everything. Hiring musicians, making payroll, making arrangements. The road manager's job was to set up the bandstand and make arrangements for hotels, sign in the musicians. So I went to Stan and I said, "Stan, is there anything I can do to help you relieve you of your chores that you shouldn't be doing or don't want to do?" I said, "I'd like to do it." I said, "Even if it's going up to ABC booking, I'd like to go along and learn something." So he must have kept it in the back of his mind because he started trying things on for me to do, which was hiring musicians, and then not handing out the payroll envelopes on Sunday, which he would make out. How he did it on Saturday night, I don't know. He'd have a change in the currency, put in the envelope, and hand it to the road manager to pay. So I took on making payroll and hiring guys, and as I told Dan, I said, "I'll do all those chores and take on anything I can, but the one thing I won't do is fire someone. It's your job." So I didn't want to be the bad guy, I guess. And out of that grew many things. As I said, I wouldn't have stayed on the band had I not been able to do other things, which includes the Kenton clinics that we had. The band was involved with the national stage band camps throughout the United States. The attraction for those camps for young people through educators was the Stan Kenton Clinic. Named the Stan Kenton Clinic drew the young people to the camps. After about 2 years, 2 to 3 years of that, Stan called me to his room and we started looking. He said, "We're not getting a fair accounting of what's going on." Because he was paying us while we were there for a week. Not making any money, but helping students. We were getting our salary, not out doing a dance job or a concert. And he said, "I'm thinking about dissolving and getting away from the camps." And he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, it's your decision." He said, "But why don't you give it another year and see what happens next year with this," which he did. And then the next year he called me to his room again and said, "Read this letter," which is, and the letter was a resignation resolving his relationship with Ken Morris, I believe his name is, to not be appearing at the stage band camps and taking Stan's name off of it. When that happened, I'll revert a little bit. He trusted me, I guess, because I had a little bit of an education. When I first came out to California after the service, I went to the University of Southern California to get my graduate work. Stan knew this, and he said, "Well, must have some brains on his shoulders," so he said to me, "No more Stan Kenton clinics with the Ken Morris." After about 2 years of not doing it, I told Stan, I asked him, I said, "Stan, you know, the Kenton clinics are needed badly, especially on the West Coast. Those young people need someplace to go with the band to further their education with jazz and with the Kenton sound." So I started camps that were out in California, taking on another responsibility, away from just being a musician, playing in a band, a little band. All those things helped me. And I think it helped Stan. He trusted me, relied on me for doing the things. He would come up to me and say, Jim, I need a draw. It made me feel good. And I'd have a little pad of paper and I'd write the date on it. I'd say, how much do I need? How much do you need, Stan? Oh, another 200. 200, give $200. And that was it. A couple of the guys would come up who I hadn't seen for a long time. I asked for money and they'd come up and say, I need a draw. And I'd kind of get shocked back at him. How much you need? Well, give me $5 per dollar, would you please? So that was the start of it. And my introduction into the band was when I was in high school in the 40s. I came from Minnesota, which Scandinavians were there playing boom-pom music, schottisches, polkas, accordion, and violin. And I got introduced to 5 trombones, 5 trumpets, 5 saxophones, and got carried away totally. When I went on to college in Minnesota, I buffaloed my way through a music history course. I had to give a dissertation on some music, so I picked the subject of Debussy and the Stan Kenton Orchestra. I related the two together with different passages. And I know the instructor knew absolutely nothing about Stan Kenton, but knew Debussy, and I got an A+ out of the class. So that was a big help. When I came out here after the military, I knew Kent Larson, we were in the service together. And I had been calling him while I was going to school that when the band was going to get ready to go out on the road, would he give me a call so that I could come over and listen to the band rehearse before taking off. He called me, said we're going to be rehearsing at the Diana Ballroom on Pico Boulevard. And this was 55. And he came over, cut classes, sitting on a bench. Kent Larson had introduced me to Bob Fitzpatrick. Gus Chappelle, trombone player from Chicago, hadn't shown up, and he was going to be showing up at the end of the week. So Fitz told Stan that there's a trombone player sitting on a bench over there. Why don't you see if he studies trombone? So Stan came over and said, Fitz tells me you're a trombone player. Trombone players are going to be showing up for the week. Would you help us out? I said, I just happen to have my trombone in the trunk. So I went out and got my trombone and sat in the band, talked to Fitz for a bit, how excited I was and would love to have gotten with the band. We were just before they were going to for their European tour. And he said, I said to him, I'd love to go in the band whenever there's an opening. He said, I thought you wanted to finish your education. I said, not if there's a chance to go in the band. He said, that chair next to me, the 4th chair, whatever, just happened to be filled, but I'd love to have you in the band. I said, well, at least I've got a chance. I know that much. And a connection. A year later, your dad called me, and I was thrilled. Total thrill. I had finished my education. Perfect time to go out on the road. I had been with a couple other bands before that, but perfect time to go on the road. Came in and was playing tenor trombone, I played the 2nd chair. I pride myself on the fact that I played a little bit of the lead. And on one of the albums, I think Stage Door Swings, I was playing some of the lead things, but I stayed there for about 4 years on tenor. And one day Stanley came up to me and said, have you ever thought of playing bass trombone because this trombone player was leading? And I said, no. So it kind of planted a seed with me. He called Con and had them send me out to California, bass trombone. And I started puffing on that thing, puffing away. And the first concert that I had a chance to play with bass trombone was in Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. We're in the dressing room downstairs, and Stanley is sitting on the bench next to the locker, and I'm carrying this horn that weighs a ton because the tenor trombone is much lighter. And Stan says to me, let me hear you play a low C. So I picked up the horn, pushed the bell down, got out the 7th position. Air came out. Nothing. Not a note. And this went on, and I said, Stan, I'll get it, don't worry. Have patience, which he did. So that developed into something. There were two bass trombones, and when Bill Smiley left, I was playing the bass part, and I stole all of the fourth-fifth trombone parts and put them in my book because I wanted to learn how to play that. And little by little, I graduated to being a bass trombone player. But the other question was favorite and least favorite band. I'll start with my least favorite band. It only lasted a few days, and it was a recording band that did the Tex Ritter album. My favorite band, I think, was from the time I got on the band to the time I left. Through the Neophonic and what have you, there were several bands. With Gene Rowland being the first mellophonium player that went out with the band as an experiment. Story about that. Stan wanted to hear what the mellophonium would sound like within the band. And Con had not developed the mellophonium yet. They had developed the mellophone, which is a French horn with the bell backwards. And the band didn't need that. We needed a bell that went forward. So Con worked on an instrument with the bell forward. The intonation was terrible on it, but the bell was forward, and Gene got it and said, I'll write some arrangements, 3 or 4 arrangements on this, which he did. He came out, he had one chair in front of the rhythm section where the girl singer would sing. So that's it. And he had these 4 or 6 arrangements that he had written. One was Misty, one I think was Tenderly, and when it came time to expose the mellophonium, he'd play his solo. During one time, Bobby Knight happened to play a joke on him. Well, before this happened, it was in Buffalo. Gene came out early. The bandstand had been set up. Gene sat in his chair, opened his book, took out his tourniquet, and started shaving his head. He wanted to have a clean shave that evening. So while playing that night, I was sent to play Misty. Bobby Knight had put something in one of the spit valves of the horn. And I remember Gene starting da 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 boom boom boom. Gene goes da 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 la da da la da. So during the bridge when that came, he sat down and he started going through his own. Couldn't find it, got up there on the nail course. He was playing along, he still got this bubble going on there. And he finally found a piece of cotton and stuck it. Put his horn down, closed his book and walked it. We didn't walk off. We didn't see him for the rest of the night. But that was the start of the mellophoniums. And from there, mellophonium, and then it went to develop the 4 mellophoniums. But I have many favorite bands.
Jim Allen, thank you very much.
Bob, can I add something very quickly? Bob, can I add something very quickly that Jim said? You know, I was the road manager in the early 70s, and I don't know whether you people realized how much of his life's fortune Stan put back into the band. But it was the same when I was on the band. Stan Kenton did not take a salary from the band. All the money went back into the band. Harold Plant, the guy that ran all of the finances in Los Angeles, all the money went to him. But I don't know if it was like when you were on the band, but I was always expected to have like $4,000 or $5,000 in cash in case he needed anything. But I think it's really an important thing that the man never took a salary. It all went back into the band and the music.
Can I just say one more thing about that? It's very interesting. You talked about the salary, Jim, and how was it put together. My father taught me very early that you need to deal in cash always. Yes, these are the things that parents pass on to their children, you know. And what you did was you carried the cash inside an extra pair of shoes, always. Now your shoes had to be size 13.5 AAA to deal with all the cash at the end of the concert. And then what we do is sit on the bed and we would take the money and we put it into packets and they're little brown envelopes and you put them in, you know, and you would send out. The other thing that's interesting about you, can I have a draw? This is all like haunting me, this stuff, is I'm the same way. I always carry cash, Never am responsible for my own money, because my father never was. He'd ring Harold Plant and say, Harold, I need some money. And Harold would say, well, I don't know, how much have you spent this month, right? And he would give him money. And of course, what I'm hearing is, no wonder I am the way I am, you know? No wonder.
See, it was that way all along.
Always, yeah.
Harold Plant, who you just mentioned, used to say, Stanley, can't you use a credit card?
He didn't like it. He liked cash. And I remember my little brother, I have a little brother who's about 16 years younger than I am, half brother. And the one thing my father taught him is you make very, very sure that your cash is inside, folded up like with a money clip around it, which I still carry, and that you've got to have it in order, because he says otherwise people will mess you around. Yeah.
Right, in the second trombone chair, we've got to hurry things along because we don't want to overlap the next piece of the program. We have Don Reed, who also was in the 50s. 55, you were playing in the Navy Band in San Diego, yes?
Yes, that's correct.
Then you joined Stan in 57.
Right.
Yeah. Was that your favourite band, the band you joined?
Yes, it was. How'd you guess?
Why? Why apart from yourself?
It was the trombone sound that got me naturally. And while I was in the Navy, I think it was December of 1954, I started going up to the lighthouse at Hermosa Beach, and Frank Roslino was playing there with the Lighthouse All-Stars. And after about the second or third time I went up there, I said, well, I'm going to approach him and ask him if he would give me lessons. I said, the worst thing he can say is no. And so he came off the stand one night, and I went up to him and I asked him, I said, Frank, my name is Don, I don't know if I said Frank or not, I probably said Mr. Roslino. My name is Don Reed, and I'd like to know if I could take lessons from you. And without hesitation, he said yes. And I almost fell over because I thought he was, for sure he was going to say no. So anyway, I used to go up to his house. He lived in Garden Grove, and I was stationed in the Navy in San Diego. And when I had a lesson, it wasn't just an hour. He charged me $10 for an hour lesson. At that time, it was pretty expensive because most lessons, I think, were about $3 or $4. But my lesson wasn't just for an hour. We would probably play for about an hour together. He would write things out, and we would sit down and play together. And then after that, we would sit down and talk. He gave me an education on jazz, is what he was doing, telling me about other people like Charlie Parker and John Coltrane. We used to sit there and listen to records, and he would point things out to me. And then after that, usually I would have dinner. His wife would fix his dinner. And then I'd go to work with him. And I would sit there all night while he played. And at the end of the job, we would stop along at some restaurant and have breakfast. And then we'd go home, and I'd stay there that evening. And then the next day I would go home. And this happened quite often. And he, why he took a liking to me, I don't know, but he did. He treated me like a younger brother is the way he treated me. And he knew my aspirations to play with Stan, and he said that he would get me on the band whenever I got out of the Navy, which I had about another year to go. So when I got out of the Navy in August of '56, I went up to Los Angeles, and the first thing I did was I went over to see Bob Allison, who was the manager at that time. And I told him who I was and everything, and told him I wanted to get on the band. And he said, you know, that's fine. He was very nice to me. And so every week I stopped by his office, and I went in to see him. And this went on for 9 months. Nothing had come up, and I was getting discouraged at the time. I thought, well, nothing's ever going to happen. And so it was in May of '57. I said, I'm going to give myself until June, and then I'm going to go back home. I said, I put in enough time in this, I'm going to go to school. And so one day, I was working at Wallick's Music City, which is a record store at Hollywood and Vine. Not Hollywood and Vine, but Sunset and Vine used to be there. And one day I couldn't make it over to his office, but I went over to a phone booth at my break, and I gave Bob Allison a call, and I said, Bob, this is Don calling. Anything new? And he says, yeah, Stan's going to reform a new band, or form a new band, and they're going to start rehearsals Monday. This was on Friday. And I said, well, can I audition for the band? He says, well, I don't know. Stan might have somebody else in mind. And I said, is Stan in the office there now? And he said, yes. I said, Bob, I'm going to hang up right now, and I'm going to call Frank Rossellino and have him call you. And he says, fine. So I hung up. I called Frank, and I was lucky that Frank was at home. If he hadn't been home, I don't know what would have happened. But he was at home, and he said, sure, I'll call up right now. And so I waited for about 15 minutes, and I called back Stan's office, and Bob answered the phone, and he says, Don, can you make a rehearsal Monday? I said, you bet. And so that's how I got on, and I feel that I really owe a lot to Frank, in spite of a lot of things that happened in his life and the way his life ended. He was a great person to me. And in regards to my favorite bands, I agree with Lennie that the 52, 53, 54 band was probably the best, and I also like the 55 band. I thought that was a very good band. And I liked our trombone section. Well, I liked the blend that we got. I thought we got a good sound, a good trombone sound. And also, I'd like to mention too that a few years later, 1964, I started studying arranging with Lennie Niehaus. I was a graduate student at UCLA at the time, and I think that was one of the best moves I ever made because I learned a great deal from him. And thank you, Lennie.
Thank you, Don. The length of time we've been associated, Jiggs, Whigham and myself, I've never known him keep silent for so long. But he's hardly had an opportunity to say anything. So
Don't look at me like that.
just give us the benefit of your wisdom in as concise a time as you possibly can.
I can do that in about 3 seconds. But I bet you people didn't realize this area of the table could be quiet for so long.
It won't be when Milt gets back there again.
This chair talks by itself. It's difficult to say which band was for me the most important because they all had this wonderful influence on what I did. I'm a huge fan, a hero. Stan was and is a hero to what I've done in my life, and was an enabler in my career. Obviously, this I think is pretty clear for all of us. If it hadn't been for Stan Kenton, and probably most of us wouldn't be much of anything except for local musicians. So I think that we have to owe him our gratitude, deepest gratitude, for making our careers, whatever they may have turned out to be, possible in any kind of way. First of all. The second thing is that I think that if you compare the bands, they all had, going back to any artist of any worth, most of them, you see there's different periods. Look at Picasso, there's the Cubistic period, the Surrealistic period, the Blue period, the Rose period. And Stan had his periods too. There's always a label, however, with Picasso too, comparing the two men, abstract people. But comparing these two artists, where every area of their lives had a very significant contribution to art of music in a certain way. And referring to the Tex Ritter album, there's a wonderful line in a movie called Oh God, starring George Burns. Maybe you've seen this film. It was pretty funny. It's a wonderful, very warm movie. And George Burns, he plays God, and he said, I make mistakes sometimes. The ostrich. That was a mistake. And I think this is probably even God makes mistakes, so why can't Stan Kenton? Solo on Cherokee and Limelight, Carl's on Limelight, and Charlie playing what was it? Stella by Starlight. I'm going to say Tenderly. Hello. And I remember listening to this thing one night over and over again, probably for about 4 hours, just over and over again. And of course, this masterful arrangement of Stop at the Savoy. So that was has always been a highlight in my life. And I remember when I had the opportunity for the first time to invite Mel, when I first started teaching in Cologne, I invited Mel and Al Porcino and Charlie Mariano and Bob Burgess to the school at the University in Cologne to do a Stan Kenton tribute. And I remember counting the band off and we played Stop at the Savoy. Well, that was for about 4 minutes there I was Stan Kenton. It was a great thrill.
Jiggs, Whigham, ladies.
Bob, can I say one quick story? A quick one? Because Don reminded me, and I must tell you this because this is sort of the influence that Stan Kenton had. When I was in the Navy, Jim Karchner, who was the lead trumpet player before me, heard me play in San Francisco, and I went up and I gave him a card and I said, oh man, if you guys ever have an opening on the band, I'll come to Los Angeles, I want to audition for the band. So a week later, Dick Shearer calls me and says, we'd like you to come to Los Angeles and audition. I'm really making this thing fast. And so I went to Los Angeles and I auditioned. My audition for the band wasn't rehearsing, was Jim Karchner and myself on the first and second trumpet book, and Dick Shearer and Stan sitting on the couch in that little room at 1012 South Robertson. And for 45 minutes, we played lead and second trumpet back and forth. And then they said, well, you sounded great, thanks. We got some other guys to audition. I think, oh man, I came to LA for nothing. Oh, jeez. So about 4 or 5 days later, I get a call from Dick Shearer, who was, of course, road manager before I was, and he says, we'd like you to join the band. This was the middle of April of 1970. And my heart, he said, we leave May 3rd on tour, and my heart sank, and I said, wait a minute. See, I was in the Navy. I said, I don't get out of the Navy until the fall. And he said, oh. And then I hear him talking to Stan. Stan gets on the phone, and he says, listen. He says, you get the president of the Musicians Union to write a letter to your admiral today. And you tell him I can't hold the chair open, and we'd like you on the band, and it's a good opportunity. So I got this, and he said, and I know an admiral. He knew the chief of naval operations, and I was out of the Navy May 2nd.
Folks, two contrasting panels this morning. I'm sorry we've overflowed a little. That's going to make Murray's life very difficult, but it's been most entertaining. Can I ask you to thank, as you know how, first of all, ladies, Leslie Kenton, thank you very much. Jim Amlotte, John Reed, Whigham, Lennie Niehaus, Gabe Baltazar, Mike Back,
Bob, let me say one quick thing. I'd like to thank you people. I know you've heard the phrase before. If it weren't for you people, we wouldn't be sitting up here on this panel. You've heard that many, many, many times. Please don't forget that. We love you all. We thank you all for supporting us up on this stage. And I'd like to piggyback what Jiggs said. He hit it right in the middle of the target. Stan Kenton paved the way for all of us musicians sitting on this stage. And I can't tell you how much he paved the road for me. Don't ever forget that, Leslie. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Right. Thank you. See you at the next two.
We owe a debt of gratitude to Murray Patterson, John Healy and Arnie Chadwick for arranging this 4-day event which celebrated the vision and music created by Stan Kenton and his orchestras over a 40-year period. Many of the finest musicians and arrangers participated, and we are grateful for their recorded legacy that remains. This event brought together many of these musicians who spoke about their experiences and joined British musicians in recreating the sound of the Stan Kenton Orchestra using the original scores. The panel discussions were held in the Marquee. The lunchtime concerts were held in the atrium known as the Indoor Garden, and the evening concerts and final gala concert were held in the Great Hall situated in the centre of the hotel. Recordings are presented chronologically in this set to enable the viewer the opportunity to experience the events as they occurred over those 4 memorable days back in April 2000. I'm also indebted to the valuable help from Ernie Gibson, who helped me get set up with some of the shots for these various videos. I hope you enjoy the sequence.